Welcome to the EndZone YouTube. Let's move the chains. Got a special guest in today, PFN Insider James Larsen. James, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Excited to talk some spring football. It's been a little while. I know everyone's distracted with college football and the NFL, but man, I just can't get the UFL out of my head.
Yeah, neither can I. And we've got a really big schedule today on this show, and I'll make sure to timestamp everything. So if you want to skip around while you're watching, feel free. We're going to talk about the U.S. Army. We're going to talk about Memphis, local hirings, the UFL to NFL signings, start date, plus some insider information on the championship game. And then we're going to close out with our optimism meter, how optimistic we're feeling about the United Football League. So let's go ahead and get it started. UFL offseason with James Larsen. Here we go. Let's first talk about the US Army kind of fallout that recently happened with the UFL. Kind of wanted to get the negative news here out of the way because it's not necessarily good news, and I'm sure you can sum it up, but basically the Army didn't get the return that they had wanted on their $11 million investment.
Yeah, an unfortunate situation and one that really falls on the shoulders of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. As the military.com report showed, part of this deal was really valuing The Rock's tweets about the Army at about $1 million a pop. And I believe he was supposed to put out 5 tweets during the season specifically for the Army. He only did 2. And it just begs the question, what was really going on there? I don't know if you noticed, but I know plenty of us in this scene were speaking about how Dwayne really didn't tweet at all during the UFL season. He did his little intro thing in Arlington to start the year so he could get his little microphone. Let's smell what the Rock is cooking or whatever he did down there for the opening game between the Stallions and the Renegades. He had a tweet or two here and there. Then he kind of fell off the face of the earth. And we didn't really get any tweets from him at all until the playoffs came around. And it's just a little strange, someone of his stamina and what he has on social media, for him to be a co-owner of this league. He was promoting the XFL a lot last year. This year, he did hardly anything at all. So I'm really hoping that next year we get to see a little bit more of him, or at least a little bit more promotion from him. But anyway, circling back to the whole Army deal, clearly not only did he not care much about the league, but he didn't care about the promises he made to the league sponsors and the people that are trying to help support this league. One of them being the U.S. Army, who had that $11 million deal. Really unfortunate how that panned out. Now, the good news is that, at least according to military.com's report, the Army does seem somewhat interested still in working something out here with the UFL to keep moving forward. Something that I was told is that the U.S. Army may be able to strike a bit of an altered deal for Season 2 where they'll be able to recoup some of what they lost through another deal. They can't get the $6 million back just because of the legality of the situation, but what the UFL can do is give them basically a deal on year 2 to make up for some of those losses.
I'm actually glad you mentioned The Rock's involvement with the league overall because I was thinking about that when this came up. And the fact that it kind of felt like he went ghost mode a little bit. And that's not something that I want to see this upcoming season. I want him to be involved because, like you said, that the US Army values his tweets at $1 million. Like imagine getting paid $1 million to tweet out something. That's how much eyes and participation he can bring to the table, not only to the league, but to the US Army, things of that nature. And it's a little alarming that, I don't know the details of the entire situation. I read the articles and things like that, but you always don't know what you don't know. And I hope that this doesn't affect future marketing with the U.S. Army, with other organizations. And I hope that The Rock is continually going to be involved with the league.
Right. I think that's one of my concerns is this story blew up. It was basically the biggest story of the entire offseason so far, right? Like, it didn't get any attention at all was John DeFilippo getting kicked out of Memphis. No one really talked about that. Everyone was talking about the Army thing. That's not good. That's really bad press for the league. It's bad press for The Rock and other sponsors, other people that are interested in working with the league. They see stuff like this. That's a big red flag because this is not the NFL. This is not the NBA. This is the UFL. This is spring football. This is something that has not proven that it can be stable for more than a couple years without major changes, such as the merger, which we saw last year, or the entire league shutting down like we saw in years prior. So hopefully the league can rebound from this. It won't be too chaotic for them moving forward. And I do think that the Army will still be involved. As far as I know, they will be. So we'll see how that all pans out. But yeah, it was pretty unfortunate to see all that unfold.
Yeah, for any company or organization trying to get reach from The Rock, this is a smart way to go. I've been saying that a long time. Going through the United Football League makes more sense than just going straight to The Rock for a deal like that. So we'll see, and hopefully the U.S. Army and everyone can be happy in this situation. But you brought up Memphis, which is a great segue to the Memphis Showboats coaching situation. They've been coachless for a while now. They even had a
Month and a half.
draft without a coach. They've been signing. It's been weird. It's been weird over in Memphis.
Well, they did have John DeFilippo was still in place during the college draft, so that was really the last thing that him and Dennis Polian did together, because that really it was right after the draft that Dennis Polian decided to step away. He just decided to go a different path. DeFilippo stuck around for a couple weeks. He was still trying to figure things out, and then eventually the league and DeFilippo decided to part ways at the beginning of August. So yeah, since then, Memphis has been without a head coach.
So what does the update look like on the Memphis head coaching situation?
So I put out a tweet last week that it's finally ramping up. The league has actually been interviewing some candidates. There is progress being made. I have also have reason to believe that we could get some news this week on that situation. I want to make it clear there is no guarantee that we do, because with spring football, everything is fluid. I think sometimes people take what I say a little bit out of context and they're like, oh, you said this was going to happen right away. Things change left and right in this scene, right? So, yes, the interviewing process is ramping up. I've also heard there could be news this week. We might not hear anything for a month. Truthfully, it's really hard to know with a league like the UFL because they change paths so drastically and so quickly. That said, what we do know is that some of the candidates that they have been interviewing are definitely people that we are familiar with. One of them that I do want to put out there, I'm pretty sure a guy like Anthony Blevins is probably at the top of this list. That's someone who was supposed to take over as the Vegas Vipers head coach in 2024. Obviously, that did not happen because of the merger and Vegas folded. Blevins ended up landing with Birmingham midway through the year because John Javis left, their defensive coordinator. Corey Chamberlain took over. Blevins, he was already down there in Arlington, so they were like, all right, we'll just stick you here with the Stallions, do a little bit of assistant work defensively there. But Anthony, he's someone that he's on the payroll with the league because of his contract with Vegas. So it would make a lot of sense for him to get the job with Memphis. They can restructure his contract to what it would be for a UFL head coach instead of what it was with the XFL. Save the league some money, and it makes sense. I think Blevins is a guy that deserves a job. We'll see what ultimately happens there. Some other names that I've heard that, could potentially get some looks would be Jim Haslett. That's former Seattle Sea Dragons head coach, had a lot of success there in 2023 with Seattle, made the playoffs, 7-3 record. And then on the other side, this one I'm not so sure about, but Bart Andrus' name has floated around. I don't think he's actually been contacted by the league. I don't think he's been interviewed, but he's someone who would be, if they're not happy, if they're not pleased with how things are going with the other people they're interviewing, Andrus is a guy that certainly would be available. Had a lot of success in the spring league and then had success in the USFL as well with the Philadelphia Stars.
Yeah, all familiar names. And Blevins, I had Scooby Wright on the show during the season. Scooby had high praise for him. So I think any new coach that you're going to get would be positive because really the only way, if you're looking at just wins, obviously Coach DeFilippo is a very amazing person and he did really well with New Orleans. But in terms of wins, it's hard to get much worse than what Memphis was.
Memphis entirely was just a disaster this year from top to bottom. I personally think it starts with their defense. It was not at all what we saw in 2023. Carnell Lake's unit was so disorganized. They gave up like 30 points a game this year. And I mean, if you don't even include the first couple games, the final 8 games, they were giving up like 35 points a game or something ridiculous like that. The yards per game was ridiculous. And the offense had a lot of struggles, don't get me wrong. But the defense could not get a stop. Memphis was down like 14-0 within the first quarter of almost every single game. It's hard to win football games like that. So they need a complete rebrand. I think it is unfortunate that the league had to part ways with DeFilippo. He's someone I have a lot of respect for. He's done a lot of good things in this scene. And he's a guy that was put into an interesting position where he basically had to take over Todd Haley's leftovers. And in that sort of situation where, Memphis was a market that the UFL, some of those executives, they are pretty high on, even though it has not been performing well. And I think that DeFlippo wanted to make sure that things stayed tight to the vest with what Todd Haley had kind of had with personnel and the roster. And I think that's where Memphis messed up. I really think they should have blown up the roster a little bit more so during the dispersal draft process, and they didn't. And that really hurt them this year.
All right, we're going to move on to some jobs, which is good, right? So if anybody can do this, they can go on to Teamwork Online. It's like LinkedIn for sports jobs almost. And the UFL has been extremely active in making a lot of hirings, right? And these numbers are just what were posted recently. Some of them have been taken off the website because they're slowly but surely made hires. But I think what a lot of people and fans in general were asking for, getting more fans in the stands, making the league look more professional. Well, how do you do that? You need people locally in the markets working for the teams. This is something that I've stressed. I think I've heard you stress it. I believe so on our show. So about like, you need someone in a city selling tickets. You need local people doing the marketing, because the marketing was non-existent last year. And honestly, for the non-existent marketing, they sold a lot of tickets for not having any marketing. But we know that the UFL and the UFL standards should be higher than that. So I just wanted to put this out there, get your opinions on some of the jobs that have been posted for the local, and they've also had positions within the league open up.
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest with you, I'm not entirely familiar with all the jobs that they posted, but it's great to see that, a lot of them are along the lines of getting that local marketing going, making sure that these teams are engaging with their local fan bases, because that is how you get people to know about teams in their cities, right? I believe we talked about this the last time, right? Where I'm based in Michigan. There are so many people that have absolutely no clue who the Michigan Panthers are. They're like, "What's that?" Or I tell them like, "Oh yeah, I do some work with UFL. There's a team that plays in Michigan here in the spring," and they're like, "Who? Like, huh? Like, I didn't know that." This team has been playing here for the last 2 years. The Michigan Panthers have existed for 3 now in the modern iteration, at least. You go down to Birmingham. I was down there staying with some cousins, and they had no idea who. Like, they were like, "Why are you down here?" They're like, "Who is this? The Birmingham Stallions? Never heard of them. That's a 3-time champs." Like, those are the sorts of things that you need to hire these little, just these simple jobs that allow the teams to get out there, to just go to local events, get some local marketing going. I think it'd be really important for the league as well to utilize these new jobs to maybe just fly out some of the players, fly out a coach here and there, just get them to do something in these cities. I know NFL and college is big right now, so you don't need to go over the top. You just got to do a little bit. You got to do something. You got to maybe connect with, Detroit. Let's have Jake Bates and the Michigan Panthers do something at like a halftime or something in Detroit here, right? I mean, those are the sorts of things that'll really help this league grow, and I'm excited to see them at least continue to head in that direction. I know Russ Brandon in the quote today, I'm just going to go ahead and pull that up really quickly here. Just give me 1 second. He says that our teams have been working diligently this offseason to prepare for 2025 and look forward to bringing that work to life and sharing it with our fans in season 2. So it's been pretty clear that they know that things weren't perfect in year 1, and they weren't going to be, obviously, with the amount of, I guess, overhead that they had to deal with the merger. There's only so much that you can do. So heading into year 2 is pivotal that stuff like this becomes more important.
Yeah, I mean, even I applied for a job. Anybody can apply for a job. So if you're watching and you have a marketing or sales background and you want to work for a professional sports league, it's a good opportunity. Those are on Teamwork Online, or you can just search them. I'm sure they're on the website as well. And honestly, great commitment. And this is the right move for the league. Okay, we'll move on to UFL to NFL. I just put a picture of Jake Bates up there, and it's great that you mentioned him because he's probably the hottest new player in the NFL from the UFL. But I want to go over some stats real quick. 60% of players who appeared in the UFL got called to NFL workouts. 78 players with NFL contracts, 62 active spring ballers, in the National Football League, so of the modern era. That also includes the XFL from 2020. And then we got some good quotes from the league and guys talking about the UFL, just praising it. Will McKay from the Cowboys, and then Kavesi Adafo-Mensah from the Vikings. I can't pronounce his name. I'm sorry that I butchered that, but talk about a team like the Cowboys. They've really been taking advantage of the special teams with Kevontae Turpin and then Brandon Aubrey coming over from the USFL. So it's awesome to see that the NFL is noticing the UFL, and that's going to attract players in the long run.
No doubt. You look at a guy like Adrian Martinez this year, who obviously wasn't able to necessarily stick on the roster, but he's a guy that was able to use the UFL to get some more film, to show that he's developing as a quarterback at the professional level, got an opportunity with the New York Jets, and really turned his MVP season into getting his name back out there. And he's someone that I think he might be on the Jets practice squad still. If not, he's someone he's floating around. We'll see what happens ultimately if he decides to return to Birmingham next year. But the stories just are endless, and you make a great point. The Dallas Cowboys, going back to the very first season of the USFL in 2022, they are locked into spring football. They signed more spring athletes than probably anybody in the NFL, and it's really worked out for them. Another guy who hasn't had a chance to make an impact yet this season, but he was really good in the preseason, was Jalen Redmond. He was defensive tackle for the Arlington Renegades. He had 4 sacks in just 4 games. I think he had 18 tackles, 5 tackles for loss. Got hurt in week 4, week 5, missed the rest of the season. That's a guy who went to Minnesota, had a really good preseason, and he's on their 53-man roster right now. So you just love to see those stories. You love to see these guys taking advantage of the opportunity. And this is why spring football exists. Spring football is not here to compete with the NFL. It's here to benefit and help the NFL and help these players just achieve their dreams and keep playing the game that they love.
Yeah, and another thing to point out is these UFL players, they save the NFL lots of money when they sign them because they can get them for cheaper and they're also developed. But to a UFL player, getting even a practice squad salary is well worth it playing a year in the UFL for whatever they are being paid, depending on their contract. And this is just good for the UFL in terms of getting players who are thinking about playing or on the fence about playing spring football, or maybe they're thinking about going to Canada. Because right now, Canada and the UFL, the CFL, they're kind of competing for talent here as well because the CFL is extremely talented, right? So this is good marketing for the league in terms of getting the best possible talent that they can get. So it's been exciting to see all of this momentum, and I'm sure we're going to have way more as the season goes on and as multiple UFL seasons go on. All right, so the big news, the UFL teased big news last night on Twitter, and they had a news drop today that the season is officially starting on March 28th. And on top of that, Friday night football, has been confirmed. James, any thoughts on that?
I'm excited. I think it'll be a good way for the league to get in front of some more faces. The Friday night crowd is not exactly the same crowd that would watch something sports related on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon. So having that slot, you have that slot open because WWE is no longer on Fox on Friday nights. I'm not expecting the ratings to be great for these games, to be completely honest with you. Friday night is never a fantastic time for sports. That being said, Fox knows this. They've got to be very, very aware of the fact that Friday nights, you're not going to be getting millions of views on those games, right? What we're trying to do is not only kind of set a bit of a new trend with football on Friday night, but you're also just trying to replace, to an extent, what you have with the WWE. If you can, to at least a point, match what you had there, see some success, and see consistent numbers. That's going to be the most important thing, is how consistent are these numbers? Because then you can gauge what your Friday night viewership is like, and if that should continue heading into next season in 2026. I think it's a great move. It also makes things easier for the league when it comes to expansion in the future. Because if you start Friday nights now, people are used to that already. Let's say 2026, you do expand to 10 teams. Now you can have a game on Friday night, and you can go back to having 2 games on Saturday and 2 games on Sunday for a 5 games a week type of schedule. So to see how that all plays out. Obviously, that's more hypotheticals than anything and more speculation. But to have Friday nights, I'm excited for it. Personally, I think it's a great move for the league and hopefully will lead to some success and them getting to just do some more unique innovations like this, broadcasting on Friday night. I think it'll push spring football in a good direction.
I agree, and I'm a little split on both topics. So I'll start with Friday nights, then I'll touch up on March 28th start date. So Eric Shanks came out, and I think that this was originally talked about a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even months ago. Can't remember the timetable, where he said that this was one replacing WWE, and then two moving over for Windows because they got IndyCar now on Fox. So to me, it seems like one, all these games, and I think an article I saw, I think by Mike Mitchell mentioned this, that these will likely all be Fox. So that makes sense. And then two, the season is in the summer. So hopefully these Friday night games take away from the games that are like at 11 a.m. or 1 or 2 in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm still on the fence because I don't have any numbers. This is kind of just hearsay, but would the attendance be better on a Friday night than 1 or 11 a.m. on a Saturday or Sunday in Birmingham or Memphis and really hot places? Because people forget, we are dealing with the Summer League. A lot of people went to Birmingham Stallions games and they'd go to 11 o'clock or one that was in the afternoon. And people were literally sweating so much. They'd say, this is honestly, it's too much. I'd rather just watch on my couch. So I think that there's something there with ticket sales. How do you feel about that?
I completely agree with you. The night atmospheres at some of these games can be really electric, especially in Birmingham, where we saw a couple of those first seasons, those night games there did really, really well. And then all of a sudden, they have a lot of games that are at 2 in the afternoon or 12 o'clock, and it's early and it's hot, and you're in May and you're in June. I mean, I was down there this year. It is hot, it is sticky, and people don't really want to go out and sit in the middle of the sun in the middle of May or the middle of June. So having those Friday nights, I think, gives you the opportunity to put some of those games down there, like whether it's in Houston, whether it's in Arlington or Birmingham. At least San Antonio has a dome, so you don't really have to worry about that city. But even like a Memphis or some of these more southern cities that you have to deal with that heat, I think it'll make a lot of sense. And to your point as well, hopefully we can get rid of some of those earlier time slots on a Saturday because those don't really tend to do great. So we'll see how the league works around that. I mean, obviously the TV schedule isn't out yet. But personally, I think the more night games you have or the more games are at least a little bit later in the afternoon, you're going to see stronger ratings altogether.
Yeah, and that's a strength I think that the CFL does well. A lot of their games are kind of in that night window, and they spread it. They'll have Thursday, Friday, Saturday type deal. It can be sometimes a little bit confusing just to have football on Friday night, especially professional, because that's not what people are used to. Then again, I think that it's a good spot to be in, and we'll segue on to the March 28th. I was really hoping that the league would go after the Super Bowl, just like the XFL did in XFL 2020. Part of it is because of the heat, and another part of it is just because I think it would do better. Uh, do you have any thoughts or any preference on start date for the league?
I think that the earlier you do it, it does give an advantage for players that can get into training camps or get into rookie mini camps or just get more NFL opportunities. At the same time, I also think you do want a bit of a break between the NFL and the UFL just so people can get their appetite. It's such a tough line to walk because on one hand, there are a lot of people that if they know that football's off for a little while, they're just going to forget about it altogether until the NFL season. And then on the other hand, you have people that are like, oh, I need a little bit of a break from football, but hey, in a month, if there's more football on, I would definitely watch it. So it's kind of like you have to walk that line. And I almost feel like an early March start date would work if you could find a way to do it the right way, where it does still give a couple of weeks between the NFL and the UFL for people to have a bit of a break, but you're not playing super late into it's not the summer, obviously, but you're playing into that warm weather, especially with basically half of your league being in hot down south areas. I the league hey, the league executives know better than me, I'll tell you that much. But I think it's something that they may want to reconsider. And what we'll really have to see how this season goes, right? Because with a whole off season with no major changes, we're not having new teams, we're not having a merger. We should hopefully actually get some local marketing. Hopefully that really helps with getting butts in the seats and we see solid attendance. If you see good attendance with this, I say you stick with the later date, with the later start date, because it gives people a break. And at the same time, you don't want to go ahead and change stuff up again because spring football is not the most memorable thing. So if you're changing the start date every single year, people are going to kind of forget when it is, and then you could see attendance dip once again.
Yep, and also the fact that I feel changing the schedule too much gives an appearance on the outside, even though it may not actually be, but it makes people think, oh, it's not working. They have to change the schedule again or something like that, just because spring football hasn't gained the trust of most normal football fans because it has folded and come up every once in a while for them. So trying to build something sustainable and that can be stapled, I believe is very important. Have you watched Oliver Luck's comments on start dates and things like that? He had a really good interview on
I did.
Markcast, and
Yes.
he had some interesting thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think his structure has a lot of potential too. Obviously, the XFL saw a lot of success there in their 2020 season. So I see the arguments for both sides. And truthfully, current executives and leadership see that they should have a later start date right now. So I'm trusting that they're making the right decision there. But I think you can see success both ways. I think either way you go about it, you just have to make sure you stick to one because otherwise people are not going to know what the heck is going on from year to year.
Yeah, and it's really difficult because you're comparing apples to oranges here with the start dates because a lot of people say, well, the XFL kicked it out of the ballpark. Like they hit it way out of the ballpark, XFL 2020, in terms of attendance and in terms of television viewership. Everything seemed so fantastic, but there are also more factors than just when the league started, right? It wasn't it, the XFL didn't kill it in TV and pack the stands out every single game for a lot of their games just because it started at a different time than the United Football League or XFL 2020 or whatever. Um, so it's very difficult. There's more that goes into it, like marketing. How much money are we spending in each city? How are we propping up the players, building up their brands, making them feel like special talents and special football players? I think that there's a lot that goes into it. All right, we'll close this part out. And starting at the beginning of the season, March 28th, we do have some insider information. James, we'll let you go ahead and take it with the championship information.
Yeah, so the league put out in the press release of the championship game is going to be June 14th. So at least we know we have a start date and an end date for the season, which makes a lot of sense. They're playing it on a Saturday this year. What I've been hearing, and again, this is rumors. This is not confirmed. Anything is subject to change at any given moment. It's spring football. It's fluid. That said, I've heard from multiple sources, and it's really starting to seem like Audi Field, which is the home of the DC Defenders, is a stadium that the league is closely looking at for the championship game in 2025. I'm excited about this prospect. I think it'd be a great place for the league to play. If you're not going to go to a neutral spot like we saw in Canton with the Pro Football Hall of Fame, having a location like Audi Field is perfect. You've got 20,000 capacity, which is fantastic for spring football. And what you're really looking to do is avoid what happened this year, right? Because the St. Louis Battlehawks missed the championship game. All of a sudden, most of those fans didn't end up going. And while it was a decent crowd, because of how big the stadium was and because of the seating arrangement where some of the upper decks were open and people were all spread out, it did not look good on TV at all. It just simply, the atmosphere, if you were at the game, you'd be like, okay, this is all right. But on TV, it did not look good. The league needs to make sure that they avoid that. So with Audi Field, not only do you have the potential of the Defenders making the championship game, and then you already know it's going to be a loud and raucous crowd, regardless, with it being on the East Coast, a bigger population, you have people that would probably travel from New York, from other states, from around the area. You're giving more of an opportunity to, one, have a really good sized crowd, and two, make sure that it looks good on TV, even if it's not full, if that makes sense. So I think Audi Field, you get to play outdoors as well, which I personally am a big fan of. Now, here is the one kicker with Audi Field. With the MLS team playing there as well, there's only so much you can do when it comes to paying the field. I mean, the lines this year did not look good at all, if we're being completely honest. That's something that I really think that the league is going to have to work on. But if you want to play the championship game here at Audi Field, you've got to work something out because the lines cannot look like that in a championship game.
All really good points. And now talk about the field, that's a whole nother thing. But I do think more fans would be willing to travel to a city like DC as opposed to a St. Louis, a Birmingham. I'm not trying to belittle some of these other cities, but it does seem smart to have the championship in sort of a destination town, if that makes sense, like a place where you can make a vacation out of it or a mini vacation weekend. Does that make sense to you? Do you think that would be another factor possibly?
Let me unmute myself there. I lost you there for a little bit at the end of you cut out there for a second, but do you want to repeat that last point just so I make sure I get this
Yeah,
straight?
so I was just saying that DC seems more of a destination city as well. So, like, if say I go for Memphis and I don't win I know I'm not going to the championship by mid-year, but I'm a huge fan of the league. I'd be more likely to spend money to go to DC than to say, and I'm not saying like I lived in St. Louis. I love St. Louis, right? But there's a difference. It's DC. It's a destination city. There's lots of monuments, lots of cool things, history. Like it would make sense for the UFL to try and take advantage some of their big destination cities to have the championship at, because it just would get more fans traveling to there. And and if your team is going to the championship, I mean, I'd love to go to DC. DC is awesome. It's a great city.
No, I completely agree with that because we saw what the league did this year where they had partnered with like the state of Missouri or whatever that travel agency was to like try to get people to go take trips and the plane trip for the championship game in St. Louis, and they were hyping it all up. It's a lot easier to hype it up if it's in DC because, like you said, you already made these points for me. There's more to do there. It's literally the capital of our country. So to have that sort of destination involved in the mix for someone who's thinking about going to the championship makes a lot of sense. There's so many positives and pros to having it at Audi Field that I think it does make it a perfect location choice as a venue for the championship game. Ultimately, I just hope that they'd be able to work out some of those little details with the field so we can have a field that looks more like a football field.
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to belittle or say any city is worse or better. I'm just saying, like, if you're the league and you're thinking about it, DC it's a destination town, right? It's got all the history, all the great things, and I believe that more people would be more motivated to go. And again, it's also when you look at it, set aside the town, you look at the stadium. The stadium is not as large as some of these other stadiums, and they do a good job of like packing it in, and the atmosphere is always great even when DC doesn't have a massive crowd at their games. It still looks really good on television. Just the way the stadium is like shaped. I don't know how they do it and when they're building MLS stadiums, but I think that would be an incredible place to have the final kickoff of the season. So I hope that comes to fruition. I really do. I think that would be absolutely fantastic if you aren't going to do it in a place like Canton, Ohio. Because, I mean, in the USFL, Canton, Ohio, it's like if you're a football fan, that's a place you really want to go because it's the Hall of Fame for football. So there's a reason why you go there. So all good stuff. Now we'll finish off with our optimism meter for we'll start with this season, how we think it's going to play out, what we think we'll see, maybe some bold or tiny predictions, and then maybe 5 years from now, kind of like a 5-year plan. So you want to go first? You're the guest.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'll go ahead and I'll start with this that to have a good 5-year plan, this is a make or break year for the league. They need to have good numbers. They need to have some big sponsors. They need this league to really pick up some momentum and pick up some hype, because season 1 went well, but there were some shortcomings that if those shortcomings repeat themselves, the league would definitely be in trouble, especially financially. You cannot have that happen again. You need better ticket sales. You need more hype. You need better TV. I mean, the TV ratings were solid. Hopefully, we see those stay consistent, maybe even improve a little bit in some of those primetime slots. And ultimately, you need fans that are actually getting engaged with the league, that are putting money back into it. Ultimately, that's what's going to lead to success. I am pretty optimistic about this season being decent. I would say, are we doing this from like a 1 to 10 scale? I think you're on mute, but I'm pretty sure he said yes. So we'll go ahead with 1 to 10. I would say I feel about a 7 out of 10. I'm feeling pretty confident. I like what the league is doing. I'm confident in the fact that they will be doing some more local marketing and getting some things off the ground. And we're through a full season 1, finally. It's hard. Every year, it's like there's a new league or there's a merger or there's this or there's that. We finally have the same spring football setup for the first time really in forever for a second straight season. So that's great news. I think that gives the UFL a lot of momentum. Let's hope that they can really just ride this momentum and make the right decisions and the right adjustments to make sure that those shortcomings don't become too big of an issue.
I like what you brought up about season 1. Season 1 is always going to be the hardest, right? Because you're learning how to do everything and you're creating the system for running the league. Now you're in year 2. You've got the system. You can tweak some things, of course, and you know how much everything is going to cost. You know the procedures, everything down to the most minute little facts for the league, right? So I think I hope to see two things from the league. One, just a bump in television ratings. And I think part of the reason why the league struggles on television ratings is because of the attendance. I'm actually going to add three things. But I think that the attendance is going to go up, right? There's no way the attendance does not improve when you're hiring ticket salespeople in each city, one, and then you're hiring people to do marketing in each city, right? And like, I mean, this is again, like, I don't have the data to back this up. This is all hearsay. So when I watch spring football games with my friends, they'll say, "Yeah, this is fun, but I don't want to watch a game where there are just no fans." And that's super disappointing because the action is incredible. The quality of play, the players are fantastic. And I do believe that in cities like Birmingham, you're going to see a massive increase. Like if they could do that with no marketing at all, then I think that there's a really good chance that they get back to what it was like in USFL season 1 or season 2 with Birmingham, where it was much better. St. Louis, they're going to do better. I think San Antonio has extremely high potential. DC is another team that did well with the lack of marketing. And then you look at Memphis and Houston. Houston, we should have probably mentioned on the show, they're going back to TDECU Stadium. I think that is going to be a huge factor. And then you add the marketing in, and I think there's only room to grow here. And I do believe that if there are more fans in the stands, it's going to look and feel better. It's going to feel like a real football game on TV. The next one I want to cover is they've been hiring people to also do sponsorships, I believe, locally. I think that's going to help the league tremendously. When you have local sponsors in the community, one, it brings in money. And two, people who are in the community who are aware of these sponsors will then be aware of those teams. So I think it's all good signs. Overall, like, I'm extremely optimistic. I'm going to go 7.5. I'm not quite at an 8 for next year, but I think that there's going to be improvement, and that's what I need to see. I don't need to see every single stadium filled to the brim. I'm literally looking at each team year to year. Like, I'm not expecting Houston or Memphis to sell out the lower bowl of their stadium, but I'm expecting something better, right? Same thing for Birmingham. And in St. Louis, it could probably stay the same, right? And they'd be just fine. So for 1 year from now, for next season, 7.5, 5 years, I'm more around like the 6 or the 5 because I have to see it. I have to see this iteration of spring football make the jumps that I expect. Do I believe they can do it? Of course, I believe that they can do it. However, I'm just at the point now. I've been covering spring football and talking about it as a fan since 2019. And not many of these leagues have lasted. Let's just be honest. So that's where I'm at now. And, that's part of it. Like, part of me has some recency bias because I was there with 2019 Alliance of American Football, 2020 XFL, and then new XFL and new USFL. And it's just been a little weird road to where we are now. I hope that this is the last iteration of spring football and that we don't have to create any more leagues, and this league is here to stay.
I couldn't agree with that more. And for my 5-year confidence optimism meter, I'd put myself at 4.5 out of 10 right now, actually. More so because, like you said, look, we know the history of spring football. We've seen these leagues make mistakes before. The UFL, they're doing well, but I have seen some trends of them kind of falling into some of the same bad habits that we've seen that these leagues have in the past. So I really need to see a good season 2 and a good season 3 before I can have full confidence that this thing's going to stick around.
Awesome. Any closing statements before we log off and hope that the UFL gets it right for season 2?
Yeah, I mean, this was a great discussion. I appreciate you having me on as always. Love talking about spring football and specifically the UFL. I'd say that, keep an eye out for some news coming up on Memphis, hopefully here pretty soon, potentially this week. We'll see if that comes to fruition. If not, it should be sooner than later as the process is moving along. And that's exciting news for the Showboats because this is an organization that really needs to figure things out. Didn't do great in 2023, had a really bad 2024 season. They need a complete rebrand. They need someone to just come in here, blow up the roster, and really redo it from top to bottom. So I'm excited to see what happens there. I think Memphis would have a lot of potential, and if you have a good team there, that makes it all the more easier to get people out there in the stands. So looking forward to seeing how that pans out, and also at the same time, keeping an eye on all the guys that are on NFL rosters.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you. Everybody out there, if you're watching, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. Thank you, everybody. Move the chains.